Hey guys, just doing the cross-sectional area of this vintage Weiand Cleveland Tunnel Ram intake. Just added again and just want to see the entry point with this D port, the actual volume that it is, compared to a little bit further down where it makes the turn there, and to check that volume area there, and then to compare its opening further down where it mates up to the head face, the intake port on the head end. And we'll just see if there's any restriction or any choke points, anything like that with this particular runner. So there's a few ways you can measure to get a fairly accurate volume area calculation. And I mean, I've gone and done this prior to this video, so I can make this video as short as I can. Just bear with me. But yeah, you can use inside diameter calipers for all these measuring purposes. You can use all sorts of tools. You can make up your own tools if you want. You can make up some cardboard hard edge things that made up, just so you can scribe your measurements and work them out on the bench, things like that. Yeah, there's a few ways to get an accurate measurement with all these funny shaped D-shaped and oval squarish type of shapes that work its way from the start till the end. And to do it accurately, you need to sort of know how to measure things. You can't just sort of measure from there to there to there and get that calculation when none of this is true. Like it's not a true rectangle or a square, right? Yeah, so what I'm going to do here is you can look at that semicircle. So what I'm going to do is I've got a point, like I said, I've already done this before, so I'll just give you the quick rundown. So what I've done is I've grabbed the measurement of that half circle. So let's just say there's a certain point where I've marked where it finishes. So what I do is there's a formula to work out what that half circle is, right? So I've already done that. I'll share with you guys after. And then I've sectioned off this section, which is like a rectangle now, and then there's a formula for that, right? So I've calculated that. So that'll be, I've got the area of the opening, and then we need to go a little bit further down, like about 3/4 of an inch down, which would be, give me a sec, which would be just below, if you can see there, just below that turn, right? So you got that wall there, then you got that radius turn, so it'll be just below that turn. And then I've done a calculation for that semicircle that you guys can see there, and I've sectioned that off. And then again, I've just done the rectangle section for that. And there's a couple of different measurements I've done also, but I'll share with you guys that a little bit later. But yeah, so I've just done what I believe, or what some people believe to be, that there's a bit of a quench point there, a tight point. And so I've done the opening. I've done that turn bit right there. And yeah, and I've also measured the opening of the port that bolts onto the head, and I've dissected that in 3 sections as well. So I'll work out this radius top half. Okay, so I grab myself the area of that, then I do that squarish rectangle area, and then I do the bottom, because you can't just work that out as a rectangle itself, because it's not. It's quite ovally, it's quite round at the top and the bottom compared to the rest of it. And you can't just simply base measurements square, the cross-sectional, you can't just base it off measuring like that, because all these shapes are funny sizes, right? They're funny shapes, sorry. You got to compensate for that corner, so you can't add in that corner, you know what I mean? You can't add that corner when that corner's not there. So look at that. So you got to do certain formulas, which I've done. And, you know, it's not easy. It takes a while. Like I spent, you know, a good couple of hours measuring everything up to about 3 times. Yeah, so it's been said before by others that there's some restriction point here compared to the actual opening down there. But you got to remember, these are different shapes, right? To begin with, you got a large floor pad. If you look at that D floor pad right there, that is way wider than the overly rounded, narrower ports that are on the end there. I'll show you in a second. But yeah, you know, you've got to consider a lot of things like that. So there's a lot of, you know, half circle measurements, rectangle. And don't get me wrong, all the measurements, even the section of rectangle that I'm doing there, I even compensated for those radius edges there, because like I said, it's, if you say if it's from about here, right, to there, that's a rectangle. So I even compensated for those radius edges. Yeah, all sorts of things, you know. Yeah, so the wide floor that's up the top there, top of the D, that works its way down as a taper, and then it eventually works its way down into a narrower semicircle that's right here. That's way narrower than that wide D pad that's at the top. So you've got to consider there's a bit of give and take. And now I'm measuring here to make sure that there's no choke point from the entry that works its way down to the head port, and I'll let you know. Yeah, and also I've done a perimeter check also in 3 different spots. So the entry about, you know, a half inch or so further down, like I said, just before the, you know, just before the turn starts right there. I've done a perimeter check with this solid but flexible piece of rubber there. You can see it just sealed along the edges nice and fine, and I did that. I'm just, yeah, can't now, but I'm just holding the camera. Yeah, and you know, just put a little scribe mark, give or take, and you do a perimeter length check. And with that, with the perimeter stuff, it's a bit tricky. Like there's a certain point, if you go below, you know, it doesn't work out, but in this instance it does. And I found that to be interesting also. I'll share with you guys too. But yeah, there's a few different steps. Like I did about 3 different steps and checked everything about 3 times. So, and you'll be surprised with the conclusion. Just wait for it. Yeah, so when it comes to measuring, it's quite hideous. I mean, there's minimal you know, leeway, give or take, you know what I mean, guesstimations when it came to all this. But I'll just give you the run through. So here we go, the top D port, which is there, the entry. Basically, I did my formulas like I explained before, break that down into a semicircle, and then I did the top with compensating for the radius edges and so on. I'm not going to get into it too much, but yeah, what I come up with, and this is based on centimeters, so centimeters squared, it's 24.8 centimeters squared, the volume area of the opening. Yeah, in order to do that, it's just a basic formula. So what you do is when you section off your semicircle, which is that little bit of the D bit there, you just get the radius of that. Okay, doesn't matter what the radius, you just get the radius measurement and you do that squared. So squared means that radius amount times that amount again. It doesn't mean times 2, it means radius times the radius amount again, right? You times that by pi, the 3.14, whatever that is. And then when you get that result, you divide that by 2, because the pi, you know, when you do measurements times pi itself, it's talking about a full circle, right? And here we're talking about half a circle. So when you get that result, you divide it by 2 because it's half a circle. So that's how you get that section. And then when it comes for your normal 4-edged, straight edge sections, it's just a matter of, you know, A times B. You know what I mean? So whatever that is times that, and you just get your result. And then you add them together and you get that area, give or take. Like I said, you got to sort of adjust things for radius edges and things like that. You got to give or take, you know, compensate, you know, here, there. But yeah, you get what I mean. So again, after doing all that, this is what I come up with. So the entry, top D port, is 24.8 centimetres squared, entry. Further down a little, inside the D port, still being a D shaped with a semi-half circle that I did a formula for, and then did that. Oh, it's hideous. It took a while to get that measurement. So the inside turn bit that's a few further below, come in at less than that, at 21.81 centimetres squared. And then the actual port, once I did all that, then the inlet port opening towards the head came in at 20.31. So what's that showing you there? There is no restriction. There is no tight point. There is no choke point within this runner. It's basically larger. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller when it hits the head. And even if we move on to my perimeter check with my little solid rubber thing I got here, these are the results that I'll come up with. I've written them down here. So the top perimeter comes in at 175 millimeters. The little bit further below where the turn is, that perimeter came in at 170. And the bottom opening come in at 170 also. Okay, so it's showing you here that the opening is great, and then by the time it makes that little turn, right, and by the time it hits it's all fine. There is no signs of any choke points. And you've got to, I mean, with this, hang on for a sec, with the perimeter thing, right, there's a fine line where this perimeter check calculation or formula doesn't work. So basically this is how it won't work, but with this it didn't surpass that inaccuracy point. So basically, if that is an area, right, what I'm holding there, that's the same perimeter, but you could squish that and you'll have no cross-sectional area. You get me? So there's a certain point where the perimeter check can work and doesn't work, but in this case it does work. So it's showing that there is a bigger opening within that D, because it's a massive platform. You've got to understand that. By the time it goes down there, it looks deceiving, but it's not. That ovalish type of outlet down the bottom, that bottom edge is very, very circular and narrow compared to the platform up here, which tapers down. You've seen this on my previous videos. So again, the perimeter check, if you look at the inside turn bit versus the bottom opening towards the head, you'll see that they're very similar when I perimeter check those two, which pretty much makes sense, because if you look at the formula style of the hideous measurements I did here, these come in real close. So the inside turn bit, that's a bit further below from the entry towards the opening, towards the head end, there's not a, you know, if there's any room of any type of error, it makes sense there. You know what I mean? They're very close. Now, for those guys, whoever they are, that are just measuring things simply by that way and that way, right? I've done that also, but that's not right. So if you're doing things that way with inside reverse style, vernier style calipers, like internal diameter measuring devices, that's not right, because you haven't got a true rectangle or square shape, like a four-sided shape. These are all ovals or semicircles in there. You can see it. That's a true semicircle there to a certain point. And then you can calculate a rectangle point there, and then you need a give or take for the radius edges, right? So to do things real, anyway, I'm going to do it that way, the wrong way. And even if you do it that way, there is no restriction. So even if you just simply go, let's times that by that, you get that figure. you go further in, right, the turn. If you go that way by that way, you get that figure slightly lower, right? And then if you do the opening, right, even though it's got, you know, sort of semicircles on the ends there, or overly type, whatever, if you just times it that by that, you get that figure. So look at that. Even if you do it wrong, there is no restriction. It's bigger, gets a little bit less, and gets a bit less. So there's a taper. But this is wrong, guys, anyway. But for those guys that are doing it this way, I just want to show you, there's not even a choke point in doing it the wrong way. So there you go, guys. You got all that measuring results. And all in all, there's actually no restriction from the entry point of this vintage Weiand Tunnel Ram to the end where it meets the head. And it's actually in a gradual, slight, tapered entry form. So that's the D port being there, and it slowly transitions into a size that's slightly smaller than the actual start. So there you go, guys. Again, if you want to increase the taper effect, remember my previous videos, there's room for porting around here, so you can actually take off a little bit of meat around there, as well as that that radius turn. Not too much, but you can go a little bit around there, a little bit around that shoulder, and that way you can definitely know, or even create a better a bigger cross-sectional area at the start than what it already is. So, you know, you can further improve that that tapered entry, the initial entry point. And you need to remember, guys, also, for those that are running these massive 4V manifolds, for any of the guys that are running Boss heads or 4V Cleveland heads that are filling the floors, then there is no choke point at the top or around this turn. It then becomes even more. Yeah, so whoever's filling in the floor of the intakes on 4V Boss heads, it becomes even more of a taper. So the cross-sectional area here becomes even greater than what's going to be all the way down there. So there is no restriction or any type of tape point. If anything, it becomes a more, how can I say, aggressive taper. You know what I mean? So yeah, there you go, guys. You know, there is no restriction point here. All this area, this is the external outlet area down there where it mates up to the head. And that's just, you know, it is what it is. That's the conclusion of it. Badass. Also, guys, you got to remember when you're measuring these, the roof wall and the floor wall are running, you know, parallel, perpendicular to each other. So you need to know how to measure. Things are on an angle there. You know what I mean? So when it enters the head, it enters on a certain angle. But you know, you got to make sure you're measuring from there to there, perpendicular. You know, from there to there, from there to there, from, you know, there to there, or so forth. You know, you can't go skipping angles, because if you start doing certain angles, you can either create yourself a larger cross-sectional area or a smaller one, you know, vice versa. But yeah, and like I said, there's room for porting. So, you know, you got that radius turn, you can port that shoulder, that semicircle there, you can port out that shoulder, you can increase that, you know, and you can, you know, you see the wide floor pad right there, you can lay that back, you know what I mean? You got so much room there, you can knock off a couple of millimeters there, and, you know, radius that off as well. So yeah, you got a lot of room for mucking around, but definitely going off what I've measured, there is no restriction up here. It's an actual larger entry going down to a smaller outlet. It's badass. No wonder they're making power. And yeah, you guys have seen all my posts, people running these, not even being modified, you know, and yeah, they make power.